Electrons in an atom are present in spaces called orbitals, and each orbital can fit different pairs of electrons. Now, free radicals are molecules with only one electron, or an unpaired electron, in their outer orbital. Free radicals have a habit of stealing electrons from any molecule they come across to make themselves stable, and it's what causes all the trouble and potentially can cause cellular injury. Now, a free radical is formed when any molecule gains or loses an electron. In the body, free radicals can be generated physiologically, which means as a part of normal metabolic processes, or pathologically, which is due to some disease. A major physiological source of free radicals is cellular respiration, which is also called oxidative phosphorylation. Oxidative phosphorylation is the process of making ATP by donating electrons to complexes embedded within the inner mitochondrial membrane. Together they form the electron transport chain, which pass electrons from complex to complex, and finally to oxygen, creating a proton gradient that will be used to make ATP. The final step of this process involves a molecule called cytochrome C oxidase, sometimes known as complex 4, which transfers electrons to oxygen. Normally, when oxygen gets 4 electrons, it gets converted into water. But when oxygen doesn't get all 4 electrons, then it'll have unpaired electrons in its orbital, giving rise to free radicals. Since these are formed from oxygen, they're collectively called reactive oxygen species, or simply ROS. Okay, so if oxygen is given 1 electron, it becomes superoxide. If it gets 2 electrons, it becomes hydrogen peroxide, or H2O2. And then 3 electrons, it's the hydroxyl radical. There are also pathological conditions where free radicals can be generated. First, they can be produced during inflammation by phagocytes, like macrophages and neutrophils. When a pathogen invades the body, the phagocyte gobbles up the pathogen, forming a phagolysosome. These phagocytes also have an enzyme called NADPH oxidase, which gets activated by the lysosomal enzymes, causing NADPH to undergo oxidation and lose 2 of its electrons. Nearby oxygen molecules can grab these electrons to form superoxide ions. Another enzyme, superoxide dismutase, can take these ions and combine them with hydrogen ions to form hydrogen peroxide. This process of producing superoxide ions and hydrogen peroxide is called the respiratory burst. Phagocytes also have a type of nitric oxide synthase, which is an enzyme that produces nitric oxide, which helps to kill the pathogen. But what nitric oxide also does is that it reacts with superoxide ions to form peroxynitrite free radical. These ions and molecules destroy pathogens by breaking down their cell membranes and damaging their proteins. Another way free radicals can be generated is through exposure to ionizing radiations, like ultraviolet light or X-rays. When the radiation hits the water in the tissues, it knocks off an electron from water, converting it into hydroxyl radical. Free radicals can also be generated when there's a buildup of metals like copper or iron in the body. For example, hemochromatosis is a condition where unusually high amounts of iron is absorbed. All this extra iron undergoes the Fenton reaction, where molecules of iron 2+ are oxidized by hydrogen peroxide, producing iron 3+ and the hydroxyl radical and hydroxide ion as byproducts. Now, iron 3+ can be reduced back to iron 2+ via hydrogen peroxide again, creating a peroxide radical and a proton. And then the cycle repeats, like an endless loop. So over time, free radicals formed as a result of the Fenton reaction slowly damage cells in various organs, and that can cause cell death and then lead to tissue fibrosis. Free radicals are also produced following ischemia, or reduced blood flow to an organ or tissue. At a cellular level, ischemic injury can lead to the production of reactive oxygen species by the mitochondria. If blood flow returns to the ischemic tissue, it's called reperfusion, and it brings more oxygen. Unfortunately though, all this oxygen reacts with the pre-existing free radicals to form more, causing more cell damage. This is called reperfusion injury. Finally, free radicals can also be generated when chemicals or medication that enter the body are being metabolized by the liver. For example, when the liver breaks down a drug like acetaminophen or Tylenol, a lot of free radicals are generated, and this could cause massive damage to the liver. Since the body generates free radicals even under normal conditions, there are certain defense mechanisms in place to keep them in check. One of them is antioxidants, like vitamin A, vitamin C, and vitamin E, which donate electrons to neutralize free radicals and protect the cells. Another molecule in our body called glutathione acts as an antioxidant and neutralizes hydrogen peroxide. In order to function, two glutathiones need to be in the reduced state where they can donate an electron and a proton to the hydrogen peroxide and convert it into harmless water. However, this oxidizes glutathione. So before it can get back to work, an enzyme called glutathione reductase uses NADPH as an electron donor and reduces the oxidized glutathione back into its working state. After giving up its electron, the NADPH becomes NADP+. So to replenish the supply of NADPH, an enzyme called glucose-6-phosphate dehydrogenase, or G6PD, reduces NADP+ back to NADPH by oxidizing glucose-6-phosphate. Glucose-6-phosphate is a metabolite of glucose, so we usually have a ready supply of this molecule as long as we're not starving. Another defense mechanism is metal carrier proteins, which bind to the metal ions and help in transporting or storing them. This way, it's sort of like the ions are hidden away, and so are not able to generate free radicals. For example, transferrin, which binds to iron, and ceruloplasmin, which binds to copper and carry them in the blood. And finally, there are also free radical scavenging enzymes, which convert the free radicals into harmless substances like water. Superoxide dismutase takes superoxide and converts it into hydrogen peroxide. Catalase converts hydrogen peroxide into water in peroxisomes, and glutathione peroxidase does the same in the cytoplasm. When the amount of free radicals produced overwhelms the defense mechanisms, cell damage starts to happen. Free radicals can react with the lipids in the cell membrane, causing lipid peroxidation. For example, let's say a hydroxyl radical has attacked this particular lipid molecule. This molecule is now left with an unpaired electron. So it in turn grabs an electron from the next lipid molecule, setting up a sort of chain reaction which ends up damaging the cell membrane. Free radicals can also cause oxidative modification of proteins, which affects the function of enzymes and other structural proteins. Oxidation of DNA can cause breaks in the DNA strands, and can also induce mutations which increase the risk of cancer. Alright, as a quick recap. Free radicals are chemical species with an unpaired electron, which can damage the cells by oxidizing the lipid, proteins, and even the DNA. They're produced in the body physiologically by the electron transport chain, and pathologically during inflammation, exposure to ionizing radiation, metabolism of chemicals or medications like acetaminophen, buildup of metals like iron or copper, and reperfusion of ischemic tissue. Free radicals are normally kept in check by antioxidants, metal carrier proteins, and free radical scavenging enzymes,